it and change the form that way, but that's a lot of work, and that essentially we just have to deal with the ice. But if we can change the temperature, which is to say the frequency of our consciousness, then we begin to melt that block. We begin to let go of this idea that history or reality is this fixed objective entity, and then we begin to observe a flow, and then we're with the flow, and then we can actually move potentially into the third state, which is this future, which is where I think free will comes into it, where steam is actually, see, flow, at least unlike ice, it's actually moving, it's alive, but it's still fixed, isn't it? The flow has to go where it flows. A river is fixed to the confines of the river, whereas when if we go into the steam state, then we become completely liberated. We become a different element entirely. It moves into air. So yeah, this sort of model, as I say, I'm just working out right now as I'm talking to you, but of these different states of consciousness, from ice, which is matter, which is solid like mineral rock, to flow, which is water, and then to steam, which is air, and how how we relate, what relationship we have with our reality, um, is determined by this the kind of consciousness that we bring to experience.
Yeah, I think your model describes the kind of movement and flow of energy really well, and it's as I said before, it suits me because that's those are little bookmarks for thought, aren't they? When you have an image, because we are very visual, despite other things. You know, that's the way we go.
Mm,
I also have an image just to kind of transpose with that one.
mm,
Um, my initial feelings about kind of determinism and free will and fatalism and all the rest of it was going back a long time when I started my inner journey, say in my teens. I was horrified at the idea that there would be no free will, and I was horrified at the idea that everything is predetermined.
right.
As I've gone through my own discoveries and investigations, and as I've learned to make the ego recede and be more humble and see things as they are, I realized that the horror of an anti-free will environment was for me was an egoic response.
Mm,
The way I see it is that there's this kind of enormous map that you lay out across your living room floor, you know, with a zillion things on it, real sort of Middle Earth mega map, and there is a laser that points down, and the laser draws a path from one corner of the map to the other, which represents your life. And where you are at any one moment is the laser, so the consciousness that you reflect into yourself, that you bring locally, is projected into your journey, your path. So your life is better described, as I'm sure a lot of people gather nowadays, as a collection of experiences rather than as an identity, because that can be stripped away pretty rapidly.
mm,
So if you look backwards, you can see that the laser has burnt, a black line through the map, and it seems pretty, permanent, and you can't do too much about that. That's where you've come from. And
right.
as you look forward, it seems indeterminate. But it's only from the point of the laser that comes down, which we can say, where does that come from? It comes from a larger entity. But we're just dealing with the point of the laser as it reaches the map, which is the individuation of consciousness. Now,
Mm,
if you step outside of the map, if you can look down on it, which is the four-dimensional perspective, and I use 4D, kind of a little lightheartedly, not in a necessarily quantum sense, because there are 9D and 12D stack models. I'm not referring to that. I mean it in a more kind of mystical tradition. If
mm-hmm,
you get off the map and go into the 4D and look down upon it, then suddenly you realize that the map exists and all routes on the map exist. And if your perspective is high enough, you can see everything and you can predict everything because you've got to go on the map, yeah?
mm,
But the sort of neuron roots, just like the pathways in the brain, are so immense, so humongous, that it is as good as free will. And there's so little difference
mm,
that from the perspective of the laser that is moving, it is free will. Only from an extremely high perspective and only from outside of the temporal space can we see that in fact it isn't. It is a determinable path across a fixed map, but the map cannot be seen when in the three-dimensional space. There's almost like some kind of universal law that says if you see the map, if you come up and look down on it, it's gonna It's going to impede your journey, even though it's nice to get up on the mountain and look down and go, ha, now I can see the landscape.
Right.
As we've already covered in this, there's a penalty to pay for that, which is, a temporal impact, which takes its toll on your body or your mind or your physiology or whatever.
Hmm. So it's almost like the illusion of free will, of autonomy, is necessary for the components of the system to operate within the
Yeah, that's right.
system.
Yeah. Because if all the little units walking around the Matrix knew they were just in a pod having a shit time, in actuality, then they'd lose heart somewhat. So the fact that free will is so abundant and so readily available to everybody, and as I say, it is as good as if the sort of purpose of mankind is to explore free will, then it's almost like kind of philosophical semantics to say, well, is that free will or is it not? And from my point of view, it just depends on how high you can get above the map.
Hmm.
So if there is a supreme creative being, which there often seems to be in my world, I can see his traces from here and there, although he
Right.
isn't a he. As I think Robert Anton Wilson said, it's so strange to think of a creative divine entity with a penis.
Mhm.
So let's call it it. So it looks down from high on the map, and my little laser point moving along is so different that there's just nothing in between as far as that entity is concerned. So we can't shift back into from the 3D to philosophize this. It's like a psychedelic journey. It's too state specific, too belonging to the 4D to bring back and put in any kind of linguistic framework. It's just too weird.
Hmm. Yeah, it's almost too weird for me to have an answer to. That seemed like good a place as any to stop this section. We'll pick up the rest of this chat a few days from now in part 2 of this interview. And once again, encouraging you to visit the blog www.aolascafus.blogspot.com. I'm in the process of setting up a forum and my own website, aolascafus.com, that should be up within a week or so. In the meantime, go to the blog, check the links, buy my book, you bastards. Keep me in business in the final days. Signing off, Aeolus Capus. Stormy weather, news from the front line in the end times.